Welcome to tonight's edition of They Sacrifice for Us. I'm Bob Fertino.
And I'm Sue Fertino.
This show is dedicated to veterans, our active military, and those in our safety forces who protect our freedoms both abroad and at home. And along with learning about programs and opportunities that are available to veterans, we'll also be getting more of a personal perspective on those men and women who sacrifice for us. And along the way, we'll answer your questions too, so please feel free to contact us on Facebook at They Sacrifice for Us radio show. Tonight we'll be speaking with U.S. Army veteran and Department of the Army civilian Ken Kovats. And if you have any questions, you're invited to give us a call at 440-946-9468. That's 440-946-WINT. Hey, Ken, how you doing?
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Bob. Thank you for joining me. Well, allowing me to join you all tonight.
So, Ken, I just want to tell you that Kurt and I would be very interested if you had any special stories to share about Bob on the air this evening, too.
Oh, my.
All right. You know what? I think we've having some difficulties right here. So, no, I'm just kidding.
Before we begin our conversation with Ken, with you, Ken, we always like to ask if you have any family members that are currently serving in the military or have served in the past, and we'd also like to thank you for your service.
Absolutely, thank you.
Well, thank you, and as I like to say, we all serve in our own way there, and we're all contributing to make this a more perfect country. In my family, I'm the oldest of 7 children, so I was the first one to join the military, join the Army. I have 3 brothers who served in the Marine Corps.
Wow.
2 of my nephews have also served in the Corps, and I have a niece who's serving in the U.S. Air Force. But I think from my family perspective, actually, when I look back at it, we come from a family of service. My father served as a volunteer fire chief in Geauga County, Montville Fire Department, for many years. My mom also served as a volunteer EMT. 2 of my brothers served as firefighters, one in Concord and one in Westlake.
Nice.
I have a brother who's a deacon up in Ashtabula County, a sister who's a registered nurse, and one of my brothers retired from the Marine Corps and now works as a civilian for the U.S. Marine Corps in Quantico.
Wow. That is pretty impressive.
What was your inspiration for joining the Army?
Well, I wish I could say it was a deep patriotic feeling that overcame my heart and inspired me to join. But when I...
You there?
Lake Catholic High School.
Woo!
I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I was an average student, GPA of 2.35, and wasn't sure what I was going to do. And I just happened to kind of pass an Army recruiter and, did a double take and said, hey, why not? And so went in and signed the dotted line a few weeks later.
So what was it like, Ken? I mean, because like I said, we graduated together, and probably the majority of our fellow graduates, went on to typical, went on to 4-year university and 4-year college or whatever, or went into the workforce. So what was it like for you? Maybe those first few years, going through your basic training, going through that process of becoming a soldier. What was that process like for you?
Well, you never forget your first wake up at basic training. Those lights come on, you hear that large drill sergeant, you're jumping out of the bunk wondering what the heck did you just do? But when I look back on it, it's really meeting the different and the variety of people that I wasn't exposed to in my time in Northeast Ohio. I grew up in the suburban rural areas of Northeast Ohio there, but having never really met people, Hispanic people or other immigrants and Asians and just different ethnicities and the different stories and the reasons why they came in. And one made me feel kind of grateful that, my life was going pretty good compared to some other people. But just being exposed to different people and learning about them really was the cool experience of it all.
Are there any other experiences that you had? So you had a pretty, and we'll get to it here in a little bit, so you had a pretty impressive career through the military. So what kind of led you, Ken, to go into the medical profession?
Well, one of the inspiring things, of course, was my dad, who was a fire chief and also ran the ambulance in the local fire department there. So, being a medical specialist, a 91 Bravo medical specialist is very equivalent to being an EMT. I grew up on the TV show Emergency, and I watched MAJ.
Yep.
And so I said, hey, this sounds kind of fun. I'm going to get to work in the hospital all the time. Woo-hoo! Well, that didn't really happen that way. I didn't realize that the company, a medical specialist is basically the combat medic accompanying the troops, on the field exercises and all that. But that was okay.
Last week we had a gentleman on our show, John Riley, who's the president of the Freedom Flag Foundation, and their mission is to establish the Freedom Flag as a national symbol of remembrance for September 11th. Could you please let our listeners know about your personal experience of September 11th, 2001, please?
Yeah. Well, I was assigned to the Office of the Secretary of Defense at the Pentagon. At that time, I was doing a residency program there for my graduate school. I was a young captain back then, and our office was about 3 miles south of the Pentagon. And we're sitting in our executive conference room having our weekly meeting that Tuesday morning, and my back's against the window, and I remember seeing one of our senior directorates, I think it was our general counsel, was just kind of staring out the window, and he's kind of mumbling something like plane flying low. And then about 2 minutes later, we started seeing the smoke billowing outside the Pentagon out of our conference window. So that was very jarring, not knowing what had happened in New York just minutes before.
Yeah.
And then just trying to figure out what was going on that day. So, we did what we could out there. The next day, our office set up a little tent there to help. I worked for the Military Health System office at the time there, and our job was to run the military health care program. So our office went up there and set up like a little area where people could make sure they got the benefits they needed and got taken care of medically and all that. But seeing that gaping hole in the Pentagon is something I'll never forget. So
what was? I mean, I'm sure you try to be as calm as you possibly can, right? You try to, as you serve in the military, you try to probably assess the situation and try to get a feel for what's going on. But what was kind of the feel on that day, Ken? What was, when you kind of looked around and you said at these men that were responsible for kind of running our military? What kind of was the feeling? As far as you're concerned, in that kind of what you could tell was the feeling of those men in that room.
Well, I can speak of my leadership both at the SecDef office as well as for Army Medicine. That our leaders were quick to quick to assess the situation and react and lead us through that very difficult period. I mean, this is what we trained for, to respond and to run to situations, not necessarily away from them.
Yeah.
And that just embedded in me, looking at those flag officers and general officers that I worked with that day.
Because I think sometimes we forget, Ken, that we all remember obviously the Twin Towers in New York City, because that's the one thing that we kind of have in the forefront of our mind because it was so dramatic, and so unbelievable. But I think a lot of times we forget that the Pentagon was also hit, and Shanksville also, and that there was devastation and there was tragedy, and there also, and with the 20th anniversary, I think now, hopefully again, that the memory of that day is put to the forefront of our minds, because I think sometimes we forget, and obviously you'll never forget that situation, Ken, because you were there.
It's a constant reminder, and people that we knew lost their lives or remained by that, and it really changed history around the country. 11 some guys changed the course of history there,
right?
And we responded appropriately.
Did you feel on that day? We'll kind of go back to that, Ken. That's one of the reasons why you serve, to take an active role in a situation like that on a day that we'll never ever forget?
Well, having been a combat medic in my enlisted life, and then getting an ROTC scholarship to get my nursing degree and be commissioned as an officer in the Army Nurse Corps, one of the great things about being an Army Nurse Corps officer or an officer or enlisted serving in the Army Medical Department is we're taking care of soldiers.
Yeah.
And whether that, if they're in Pentagon injuries or coming back from Afghanistan or Iraq back to our hospitals and taking care of them, or just seeing those who have served come into our emergency departments, veterans or retirees coming in and taking care of them, that's just the greatest feeling in the world. And, peacetime or wartime, it's taking care of those great Americans, which is really the capstone of my career.
So you look at your career. Maybe you could tell us let our listeners know a little bit about kind of your progression through the Army and kind of what happened after. I mean, it's kind of a cool. So like I'm looking through your, I guess it's called curriculum vitae. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, some Latin word that call for a bio.
Okay, I guess that's a cool word for bio. But so maybe you could let our listeners a little bit about some of the responsibilities that you had when you served in the Army.
Yeah. So one of the cool things about my Army career when I look back is that the opportunity to grow and progress at each stage in my career. So starting out as a young private, I worked as a combat medic for an air defense artillery unit in Germany, going on field exercises and training during the Cold War. Then I had the opportunity to come back stateside and work in a couple Army hospitals. And then about in 1989, I was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and one of my nurse corps colleagues, a captain, Captain Charlotte Stevenson, I remember her name, came up to me and said, "Hey, here's an information paper on an ROTC scholarship called Green to Gold. And if you get this scholarship, they'll pay you to go to nursing school, and you get commissioned as an Army Nurse Corps officer."
Nice.
So I'm like, hey, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I applied and got accepted. I came back to Ohio to the University of Akron, where I got my nursing degree. A lot of great nursing graduates from the University of Akron. And then I got commissioned in December I graduated, got commissioned, and then got married around December 1993. Okay. And then just took off and went to Officer Basic course that following March. Okay. So I first started as a newborn nursery nurse up in Alaska.
Oh, so cool.
It was really cool because, young families having their first or second babies, and I'm part of that, a cool experience. Yeah. Later on, I went to Tripler Army Medical Center in Hawaii, where I worked in the pediatric ICU unit, which was a rough assignment there, taking care of those young kids who were major complications. Yeah. But then after Hawaii, I served as an emergency room nurse at Fort Bliss, Texas, out in El Paso. And then I applied for a master's program in healthcare administration. The Army has a master's program in healthcare administration, coordinated with Baylor University. So I went to that program. Nice. Part of my Pentagon experience was my residency part of that. And then I got to go back to Europe to serve as a staff officer in working on medical facility projects all across Europe, all the Army clinics and hospitals. I was the clinical consultant, making sure our facilities were acceptable for clinicians and for family members, and making sure we had the right spaces for the patients over there. Cool. All right. And then my last assignment as active duty, I was the assistant dean at the Academy of Health Sciences at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, where we were responsible for all the medical training programs for the Army.
Cool. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Ken, and we'll take your conversations to at 440-946-9468. You're listening to They Sacrifice for Us on WINT 101.5 FM, 1330 AM, and WINTradio.com.
Did you know a lack of water causes headaches? Why suffer? You can love the water you drink. 100% pure, 100% clean, and 100% fresh bottled water. For almost 30 years, Sunrise Springs Water has been delivering and servicing Northeast Ohio with 5- and 3-gallon bottled water. 100% of bottles are recyclable. Save the environment and nourish your body with natural spring water. Love your water. Call Sunrise Springs Water and ask about their free trial offer. For delivery to your home or business, visit sunrisespringswater.com.
This is Dave Ramsey, and we're proud that The Ramsey Show can be heard in Northeast Ohio, weekdays at 2 on Integrity Radio, WINT.
The Original Mattress Factory wants to help elevate your sleep experience this holiday season. We'll be giving away a queen-size adjustable bed set in our Comfort and Joy raffle. When paired with our hand-built mattresses, our premium adjustable beds make everyday activities like reading and watching TV in bed more comfortable. Visit any OMF location by December 18th to enter and for all official rules. No purchase is necessary to win. The Original Mattress Factory, bringing you tidings of comfort and joy this holiday season.
holiday is on the way, and that means one thing: mattress sales. Retailers will tell you it's their biggest mattress sale of the year. They'll make you feel like you have to buy now or you'll miss out on a great deal. At the Original Mattress Factory, we offer something better. Thanks to our factory direct business model, we're able to offer our lowest and best price to everyone, every day. So you can buy when you're ready. Visit an OMF location today to experience the Original Mattress Factory difference for yourself.
I'm Tom Swope. Join me for Legacy, Stories from the Second World War. Sunday mornings at 9:30 on WINT FM 101.5, 1330 AM, and WINTradio.com.
Welcome back to They Sacrifice for Us. We're joined by U.S. Army veteran and Department of the Army civilian, Ken Kovats, and you're invited to join in the conversation, so please give us a call at 440-946-9468. That's 440-946-WINT. You know, Ken, both the Army and the medical field has done very well with you. If you wouldn't have enlisted in the Army, would you still have taken that medical path?
I don't think so. It's hard to say. I mean, I've always played a what if. I consider. I don't know. It's hard. It's really hard to answer that one. I try to avoid playing the what if game because I'm always fearful I may have zigged when I should have just zagged. But it just led me there. One job led to another. I never thought when I enlisted, I thought it'd be a 3-year enlistment and I'd be done.
Yeah.
Right.
I never realized that. Oh wow, my enlistment's up. Let's re-enlist. Oh wow, that's almost up. Let's go ahead and get a scholarship and just go on through retirement.
You know, and one of the things which is kind of cool, yeah, the Army was very good to you, right? So you enlisted in June of 1983, retired from the Army in May of 2007, right? Had the Army pay for your education, which is really, really cool. And then you worked as a civilian. You're currently working as a civilian in Texas, in San Antonio, one of our favorite cities, right? We love San Antonio.
Yes.
But so my question to you is, Ken, is that you never served did any active duty, right? So all of your service was stateside. Is that correct? Or I'm sorry, I mean, but not in a combat situation, correct?
Yeah, I have never had the privilege to deploy to a combat situation like Iraq or Afghanistan. But I can say, from my, as a staff officer, I did contribute to those soldiers who went there and their families. Either making sure that they have the health care service they need, especially when I was in Europe, or establishing training programs to bring medical units over so they can get the trauma skills and those combat clinical experiences to prepare them for when they get deployed.
So, because we've had guests on our show before, Ken, more in the Vietnam era, where we had two gentlemen on, one that served in Vietnam and then one that didn't, and there's a lot of, and maybe guilt is a strong word to use in those kind of situations. But how do you did you experience any of that kind of feeling in knowing that you didn't actually, I mean, and I don't mean that derogatorily at all, but and that you didn't actually serve in a combat situation? Did you have those feelings? And I know that what you said, you prepared those men and women that were serving, but how do you kind of get through those types of feelings?
Oh, you do see a lot when I was active duty, when people have combat patches on their shoulders, and I did not have one.
Yeah.
You kind of think, grateful that, I consider myself fortunate that I wasn't separated from my wife and kids. I mean, even though others were, and that's, some me effect. But, my job and our focus on taking care of those people was important, and someone had to do it. Yeah. And it's just as worthy of service.
Yeah.
For it.
So maybe you could let our listeners know about what you're doing now. Like I said, so the Army got you, right? It seems like one of us, you retired, but you're back. So maybe you can let our listeners know what you're doing now as a civilian working for the Army.
Yeah, so I work at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio for the headquarters of the U.S. Army Medical Command.
Okay.
I'm part of what we jokingly call the no colonel left behind. A lot of retired officers in the forces there.
Okay.
But our role is to ensure that all of our Army soldiers, active, reserve, and guards, are healthy and medically ready and fit so that they can deploy and do their jobs, because we don't want soldiers who are injured or unable to deploy, because that's not an effective soldier. And then our second part of our mission is to make sure that all of our Army medicine physicians, nurses, providers, and technicians have those clinical expeditionary skills they need on range and take care of great Americans. One of the after effects of the Gulf War I back in the 90s was we had a lot of docs, nurses, and technicians deploy, especially from reserve units, and they weren't really current in those clinical skills. We would have a lab technician arrive in Kuwait or somewhere, and he doesn't really know how to operate the lab equipment because he's a UPS driver. And so we've really taken the focus now on making sure that our Army medicine personnel are technically and tactically proficient to do their mission when deployed.
So how did COVID kind of throw a curveball in all those preparations and kind of your plans as far as keeping our soldiers, up to date as far as medically is concerned?
It was a challenge, just like in our civilian hospitals. We shut down our ORs for non-emergent surgeries. Well, emergent surgeries occurred, but still you had those who needed knee replacement or knee surgeries so they can go back out and train and not be on crutches. And interesting, and we have several deployments that occurred of Army units going to New York City and other areas. Well, historically when deployed, we're always thinking surgery and trauma, and this was really our first mass deployment where it was more of a medical issue instead of a surgical issue. So that was kind of unique in the situation.
And once again, the Army adapt and do your job, right? I think, this has got, it's unprecedented, and unfortunately, it seems like we're going back down this road that we went down in 2020. And so what is the Army doing now? Because we're not out of COVID, right? Things are kind of getting crazier as the day goes on, and cases are going up, and so what is the Army doing now to kind of combat COVID?
Well, obviously preventive measures, and many of our installations, we're back to wearing masks now because of the Omicron variant. And that's a force protection issue, so it's a big force protection issue. Training still occurs, and even during the peak of COVID, we still had soldiers going to basic training or going to their specialty school training. We just, our training staff just had to adapt and, spread soldiers out and do massive testing and sadly, in certain cases, quarantine them to barracks or not allow their family members to come visit them at graduation. Talk about a letdown there. But, the mission has to continue, and we just implemented those force protection measures utilizing science as well as the practicality of things to make the best decisions to protect our force.
And that's good. I think we're like, so we're not out of the woods, but it's not, like I said, the Army's always ready to adapt and change and do what it has to do to keep our soldiers safe. Can I ask you, like, you had this storied career in the Army and still have a storied career in the Army, Ken. So is there any moment that stands out for you that says, man, I've made a difference in either the lives of soldiers or in something in your field?
Oh, wow. Obviously being a nurse, you're making a difference every day, but sometimes it kind of just seems routine. I think what I've enjoyed out of my career is seeing, having a young private that I helped train at one of my previous assignments, and I see them again, and it's actually happened once. I had a young private I trained at a training event back in the mid-'90s, and 10 years later I saw her again as a second lieutenant. She finished up her tour of duty, wanted to get commissioned. She became a nurse corps officer, and she recognized my name on the directory and came to my office and stopped by to see me.
Wow.
And that really made me feel very proud that I was able to contribute to the future of Army medicine.
Yeah, that's a cool story. That is a very cool story. So one of the questions we always like to ask our veteran guests, Ken, is what advice would you give to a young man or woman that is considering, and maybe was in the same situation that you were, graduating from high school, that's considering a career in the military?
Again, the views expressed by Ken Kovats do not represent those of the U.S. Army. But I can say for me, there's just so much opportunity. Yeah. And, if you focus on what your job is and look for those opportunities, they'll pop up, especially in the military. Because in the military, they expect you to grow. Nobody stays a PFC for 15 years. You're going to grow. You're not going to be a lieutenant for 15 years. They're going to want you to be a captain, and then a major, then a colonel. And there's all those opportunities out there to kind of fast-track you into leadership. And you just got to, keep your head, not keep your head down, but do your job well and look for those opportunities and stay out of those risky situations that might derail a career.
Yeah. Any other anything else, Ken, that you've accomplished in your career that we've got about a minute left that
I'm going to do a quick plug then, if you don't mind.
You go ahead. Do that quick plug. Right. Thank you.
During my tour in El Paso, I had the opportunity to participate in the Bataan Death March. It's at White Sands Missile Range, a mile north of El Paso. And this is a 26-mile road march in commemoration of those survivors and those who passed away during the actual Bataan Death March of 1942. And it's a really great event. This year they're holding at White Sands Missile Range again on March 20th, 2022. Okay. There'll be Army units there, Reserve units, ROTC cadets. If you'd like more information, go to BataanMarch.com.
Great, thanks, Ken. Hey, that's a great way to end the show. Thanks so much for being on tonight.
Thank you.
We appreciate it very much, and it was great seeing you, and it was nice keeping in touch with you, Ken.
Oh yes, I appreciate the invitation to share my life with you all.
Absolutely, and thank you for joining us for this week's edition of They Sacrifice for Us. And in case you missed a part of this show or any of our previous shows, you can listen to them anytime, day or night. Just go on to WINTradio.com. Click on Archive Programs, select the show by name and date, and simply download it to your computer or mobile device. And remember, you can catch this and all of our shows on your smartphone or other mobile device at TuneIn.com and on your Amazon Alexa or Google Home.
Good night to our family, our American Legion family and friends. Please keep in your thoughts and prayers those who protect and defend this country every day, and may God bless this great country of ours. Thanks for listening to They Sacrifice for Us on Integrity Radio 101.5 FM